The Israelis are not the audience. They have to say this because they're not retarded, but their followers are retarded. Okay, they know the radicals that they have created for them to their support base. They know how delusional they are, and they know that they need to provide this content for them to keep them motivated, to keep them in the delusion that they're supporting something powerful, something great that is worth that is worth, because if these people are, I follow them, by the way. I follow their YouTube channels, I follow their Telegram accounts, I follow their X accounts, so I know what they're saying. They live in a parallel universe. They don't live in our reality. They live in a different reality, right? And the bubble that they live in, if that ever bursts, they think that this regime is not worth defending. A regime that is surrendering to Israel, a regime that is surrendering to Trump, who killed Qasem Soleimani, they need to be tough. They need to think that the Islamic Republic is tough and undefeatable. And the thousands of people who died in the protests, they were killed by Mossad agents in the ground. That's their reality. That's what they believe. The regime needs to stop this bubble from bursting, or else they will lose all of these people, and that would be the day that they collapse. Yeah, this is why they cannot accept the deal, because if they accept these terms, it's really hard. So the Islamic Republic for the past 40 years, they keep backing out and surrendering to the United States and Israel, but then they make it seem internally that something else happened. But there's some level of surrender that would be too undeniable. And you don't have to lose all of them, even if you lose half of them, because they already lost a lot of them. The regime used to have, like, I don't know, 12%, 16% support. Why is it now close under 5%? Because it was becoming more obvious to more people that this is not the regime that we were defending. So if it's now 2% and turns into 1%, or if it's 1% it turns to half a percent, like, at some point would it become impossible to hold everything together when you don't even have your own people supporting you, right? So this is why they cannot accept these terms of surrender. All right,
We had a Jeffrey hand. Are you still? I see your camera's off. Do you want to chime in there, Jeffrey?
Sure. So, I mean, to bounce off what Armin said, he offers some pretty powerful insights. I'm going to touch on two things. I would contend there's a very high degree of probability that President Trump's statements are reflective of President Trump's version of what sometimes was called Nixon's crazy president strategy. And that's to be operationally unpredictable to offset the inherent disadvantage that representative republics and or open and free democracies have regarding strategic deception and denial. And as far as what the outcome is, given think about what he said, you can't have a nuclear weapons program to the Mullah regime. Well, given the Mullah regime's pseudo-theological motives and subsequent inelasticity in said motive, coupled with the operational impact of revolutionary and disruptive technologies that make it easier for an actor to obtain weapons of mass destruction capability, whether it's nuclear or advanced biological. We'll just deal with nuclear. The simple fact is, to ensure the Mullah regime doesn't have a nuclear weapon, you'd have to ensure that the Mullah regime doesn't survive, because they're never going to give up that pursuit. So, I mean, I think Armin's right on the money.
To that point, even if there was any doubt that the Islamic Republic was going to go for a nuclear weapon, now there is no doubt, because based on everything that is happening, they feel naked right now. They feel like they have no deterrence capability. So even if there were some elements within the Islamic Republic that thought to themselves, like, maybe we shouldn't have a nuclear weapon, they're not thinking that anymore, right? They think, like, we need a nuclear weapon, like, ASAP, more than ever before, or else they're going to get rid of us.
Absolutely. So even on top of that, maybe the strategy of, considering that U.S. policy, you have divergence between political policy and environmental cycles, in part defined by our electoral process, right? The bad guys go, well, they're going to do what Clausewitz said in his second reciprocal action, which is the only time your adversary will comply with your will is if they view compliance as being less painful than resistance. And furthermore, that position is either immutable or is perceived to be immutable. What that means is that the regime would then just hunker down and wait for, say, President Trump to leave, or maybe the political environment in the United States changes where they think that President Trump will be constrained, and then go for the nuclear weapon then. Right? In other words, they just bide their time. The simple fact is this: the Mullah regime is pseudo theologically motivated, which means the elasticity of their actions are very, very high. I mean, they're not going to change regardless of what you do. So, given that reality and the operational impact of those trends that I talked about, the technological trends, lowering the entrance barrier for somebody to get a that kind of capability that is deemed unacceptable, your course becomes clear. The Mullah regime has to go.
Yeah. One last thing, I know we have to move on, but one last point I want to add is that a lot of people don't understand the threat associated with the Islamic Republic being nuclear, because a lot of people are like, well, they're not going to use it because they're not suicidal. The threat with the Islamic Republic being nuclear is that then they will, with an almost guarantee that nobody is going to come to do a regime change after that, then they're going to do whatever they want, right? So there's two things that the Islamic Republic does that is a concern. One is that it's cruel and brutal to its own people. Two, it exports terrorism all around the world. It does both of those things with the understanding that cruelty to the people in Iran might cause regime change, and exporting terrorism around the world could cause regime change. But with a nuclear weapon, it doesn't have to worry about that anymore. So even if they don't use, a lot of people are like, well, they're not going to use their nuclear weapon. But while having it, knowing that nobody is going to try anymore to come and change the regime, the level of support for Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, sleeper cells, they're going to become so much bolder with so much more confidence without much less fear of regime change when they have a nuclear weapon. So they're going to become a much bigger problem to the rest of the world once they go nuclear. And don't doubt that that's what their goal is. If the Islamic Republic doesn't fall, they will eventually have an atomic bomb. There's no doubt about that.
Okay, next we have Leonard C.
Hey, how's it going? Hello, everyone, and thank you, Armin, for this space and your time. Armin, in the joint stream with Goldie, you touched on the fact that this is the minority in Iran, the people who carry these extremist. You said it's like a 5%. Okay, so my issue is that if 5% of the apples are rotten, and I have 100 apples in my kitchen, it's impossible to live with the option that one of these apples, if five of those 100 apples, is capable and willing to suicide bomb in the kitchen and take out every other vegetable with it. The thing is that you're right when you're saying education or indoctrination is the issue, and that these are smart people touting these false narratives, but they're touting it to stupid people. I'm sort of asking, how do you handle these post-revolution sleeper cells, that believe that their god has been eliminated by the evil Israel and the USA, right? If they can still carry this belief that the Ayatollah is the representation of the Messiah in lieu of Messiah's existence, etc. And a few more things about the. This is my question, and just a note about the discussion with Jeffrey from a second ago. I wouldn't take anything really at face value, because similar to the 12-day war, there was like a week leading up to it where the entire media was like, oh no, Netanyahu and Trump are not aligned, there's a misunderstanding, and it was all like, meant to get the gear going in the, let's call it, obvious direction, like knowing that the media is going to overreact and churn this for a week allowed them the freedom of space to act. The thing that you mentioned about the nuclear option and that they will lash out and attack everyone, this is the Islamist two good options strategy. I'm telling you, you can either pay me and not convert, and that's a good option. The other good option is convert to Islam. And the third option, which is why would you take it? I gave you two good options, is we will kill you. They don't have any other thing other than that. So that's the issue with Islam. Thank you.
All right. So, guys, from now on, if we have multiple points, let's do one point at a time. So that I think let me respond to one point, and then give me the second point. I think that would work better, right? New policy. With regards to the extreme, you're talking about extremists. Let me just actually clarify something. We don't know exactly what the level of support for the Islamic Republic is. I think it's under 5%. Okay, some people say 1%, but we don't know. However, whatever the level of support for the Islamic Republic is, the level of extremists is higher than that, because there are some people within Iran who don't support the Islamic Republic because it's not radical enough, it's not Islamic enough. So you have to take those into account as well. There are so many people within, well, not many, like it's not like they're not like they're still a very small minority. If the support for the Islamic Republic is 1%, then the radical crazy Muslims are 2%, because some people have stopped supporting the Islamic Republic because it's not Islamic enough. There are many people who have defected from the Islamic Republic because women in Iran are not wearing hijab and the regime is not doing anything about it, right? There are many people, there are some people who have defected from the regime because they actually have, they were wise enough to see that their response to Israel during the 12-day war was pathetic. They're like, you're embarrassing us, right? There are some people who have defected from the Islamic Republic because they know that the Islamic Republic is talking to Trump, like they're lying when they're saying like, oh my god, we're not actually talking, look, talk to the hand, talk to the hand, we're not going to talk directly to you, we're going to have like, because you killed Qasem Soleimani. They're like, okay, we're not children, you're actually talking to the killer of Qasem Soleimani. Like what, there's a, they say like nizam uskolamun karde, which means like the regime thinks we're retarded. So some of these radicals are actually not that retarded, and they are upset with the Islamic Republic because they're like how, like, do you really think like, okay, sure, this propaganda that you're working on works with some of your followers, but some of us really understand what's going on, and they're angry because they're saying this is not what we did the revolution for. And by the way, a lot of these people have a problem with the name republic in the Islamic Republic, right? So they want to topple the Islamic Republic and just bring, what do they call it? Jamhuriya Islami, Hukumat Islami. So basically, Islamic government. Without, like, they want to remove even the, because they understand the word republic for them is Western. The
Like an
parliament
imamet?
is Western. They're calling it Hukumat Islami, which means Islamic rule. Imamat is what the Taliban calls it right now, right? They want to get rid of the idea of a president. They don't want to get rid of the idea of a parliament and everything. They're getting closer to, just like having Islam rule, right? So we have to take that into account as well. So your question is like, how do we deal with these people? Susie, you're right. It would be technically, I mean, it's an imamat is supposed to be when the imam of your time is present, right? So, for example, if when Hussein is alive, he's the imam of our time. When Ali was alive, he's supposed to be the imam of our time. Right now, the Mahdi is supposed to be the imam of our time, right? And he's in hiding. So I don't know how you could have an imamat without the living imam present. But I'm pretty sure they will come up with creative ways to suggest that Khamenei is the, I don't know, could rule in his place or something to have an imam it. But with regards to Leonard, you say, how do we deal with these people? I mean, this depends on the type of radicals we're talking about, because a lot of these people are radicals, but they will just have toxic ideas but not become violent, right? Like, we have to see what percentage of them are going to become security threats. So I think in a free Iran, we're going to have so much anti-Islamic. The most of the population is going to be so anti-Islamic that these people are going to, the people who have these Islamic views are going to find that this is really not their country anymore, right? I think we need to talk to an expert regarding what would happen if you were a Muslim who thought that the Islamic Republic represents you and Iran is a country for Shia Muslims, or if you were one of those who think that the Islamic Republic is not Islamic enough, if the Islamic Republic falls and now Iran becomes the Islamophobia capital of the whole world, and you're a citizen in this country and going around with your religious views, people look down on you. Imagine if you're going to the bank, people look at you funny because of the Islamic clothing that you're wearing. if people who are going to the mosque, I think it's going to get, it could potentially get really anti-Islamic, the environment in Iran, especially given the massacre that we had. I think I can imagine in Iran where people are being shamed for praying. I can imagine in Iran where people are going to be shamed for wearing a headscarf. I could imagine right now that a woman with hijab passing by and people looking at them like, still? You're still wearing a hijab after what happened? I can imagine that being the future of Iran. So you guys could tell me, like, what do you think happens to people that now feel like, okay, this, like, would they migrate out of Iran? Would they become isolated and more radicalized? What do you think will happen? Like, I don't know what will happen. I think this is actually new territory for us. So before even education could get to these people regarding, like, oh, maybe Islam is not a good religion or not, I think we're going to see a lot of hatred and shaming against these type of people. I think a lot of people who are religious are going to not even express their religion, are not going to basically keep it to themselves. When it comes to the security threats, those ones just need to be like a intelligence operation, anti-terrorism operation. So, I'm pretty sure we're going to have like a Shia terrorist group that is going to try to topple the new secular democratic regime to bring Islamic rule back. Some of them are going to be convinced that this is good. This is weird, but let me tell you why. Some of them are going to be happy that the Islamic Republic has fallen, because they're like, oh, this is exactly based on the prophecy, because the Mahdi is supposed to come back when there's only, I think, 114 people left in support of Mahdi. So they're going to be like, oh my God, we're losing. This is great. That means that Mahdi is coming soon. So we're going to keep fighting on the right side until Mahdi comes back. But the fact that we're losing, some of them are going to see this as a sign of the Mahdi's return to be sooner. Some of them are going to see it that the opposite. So there's two views. One is that before Mahdi comes back, we're very weak and there's only a few of us left. And some people have the view, no, the Islamic Republic is going to be handing over an army to the Mahdi, so when he comes, he's ready. So some people are going to actually be encouraged by the fact that they're losing. Okay, so it's weird. But again, I don't know. Education and informing people about Islam is a long-term thing, but when it comes to, I think, like, short term, we're going to see so many radical changes when it comes to anti-Islamic views and shaming, and this becoming Islam becoming a taboo in many environments inside Iran, that those short-term effects is going to be so much more observable than the long-term effects of education. Sorry, BT, I went for too long.
No problem. I'm curious about the Mehdi. Are the Jews hiding behind trees and rocks before then or after?
Before then.
Okay, I just have to make sure. Next, we have left-handed.
Left-handed? Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Go on. Yes,
Okay.
go on.
Are Iranians familiar with kind of like the story of not Cyrus the Great, but Alexander the Great, just as much as Cyrus? Or is it just mainly just Cyrus due to your history?
Well, Alexander the Great attacked Iran and he burned down Persepolis, so he's not a popular figure among Iranians.
Okay, so it's kind of like one of those grudges that never ends, like one of those blood feuds.
Yeah,
Because like a
I've
lot of
seen
his
some
ideas are
people.
just a lot of his
I've
ideas
seen.
are easier to translate in terms of capitalism. I'd have to dig into Cyrus, but I was just thinking, I was just curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, he burned down Persepolis, so there's not that many people who like him in Iran.
Okay, all right, that's good to know. And the second question, so really what I'm trying to get to the heart of is like in America, we've made so many kind of mistakes that are kind of built into the systems that we have here. Talking about like the woke stuff or the racism or anything like that. I'm talking about like rationalism is like this rationalistic mindset is what got us to where we are now. But now we're kind of hitting diminishing returns on innovation. And I think that there's a huge opportunity for Iran to kind of look at what America has hit a dead end and figure out, okay, here's how we can redesign like an improved version of what America has through the same values. So in technology, they call it like the leapfrogging effect, where you bring in all the latest infrastructure, and it's really easy to do that because there's nothing there that you have to destroy. And I think from a social level, from an organizational level, Iran's in that situation where like there's a huge opportunity for you guys to learn from our mistakes. And I'm just a bit curious if, are you guys
Right.
trying to like compete with them, like not compete with America, but kind of copy what we have now? Or can we like look at like, okay, here's some honest criticisms about what America could improve and what we can borrow from America that also supports our local traditions?
So, but let me just mention this, that America actually borrowed from Iran when it comes to so many of the values that made America great, right? The founding fathers of America referred to Cyrus the Great's way tolerance and acceptance of multiple different people with different ways of life. That was a role model. They actually refer to it, right? They actually use it as their model. That is their model that the American founding fathers used to turn America into a land of opportunity that was open to all people around the world. So this is why they also consider Cyrus the Great's Cyrus Cylinder the first declaration of human rights in history, right? When it comes to the mistakes of America, America's mistakes is, first of all, America is still growing, and is the gap between America's productivity and growth is actually widening. So America, even if America makes mistakes, is still the land of opportunity and is still much ahead when it comes to productivity and contribution to the whole world, is ahead of every other country, and it will
I can
continue to
clarify a
be.
bit just because I know what you're saying, and you're right. It's like the momentum is what is has diminishing returns, and like the costs of improving innovation is what has diminishing returns.
So,
And like
so
in go ahead.
usually the momentum slows a little bit right before it peaks again, right? And
That's
I
true
think
most of the time.
yeah, and I think United States is going to also see another peak at some point, right? Pretty soon. It usually goes on, gets really fast with a new industrial revolution, and then it slows down, and then it gets closer to the next industrial revolution, and then it peaks up again, right? Because of the technological advancements, right? But America's mistakes, is usually when it steers away from the values that made it great. And the good thing about Iran is that Iranian people really do believe in, and this is not about America, this is about every society. Any society that abides by these values, and I actually have listed them, if you want, I can read them, right? Any society that abides by these values progresses faster. And United States became the greatest country in the world because it was, it actually not only abides by these values, it actually sometimes created these values.
So as a concrete example, you can look at Berkshire Hathaway and the way that value investing is different from, say, day trading or most other kind of speculative
Wait,
investments.
wait. Okay, go on.
I wanted to give
But
you a
then
concrete kind of finance example, if if that's preferable, because I'm not sure how that translates into culture.
all right, get to the point because you interrupted a point I was trying to make, but make your point fast so that I could then make my point.
Okay, so Berkshire Hathaway has completely been able to decentralize their decision making within their company, and that's something that other companies are not able to do. Everything has to be centralized. And that in America, we've had this silent war going on between the local government and federal government, where all of the incentives come from the federal government, and as a result, due to political pressure, there's this incentive for the federal government to accumulate power and to distribute incentives downward to kind of control those local governments. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that we have is that bottom up growth is disincentivized by the way that the system is structured itself. But the way Berkshire Hathaway has done it, and he has a book about this, it's called Poor Charlie's Almanac, I think would be
All
like a
right,
better
let me.
approach.
I think we're getting off track. It's not a good idea to compare how a country operates to how a mutual fund or any other fund operates. These are completely different. That one is in an area of finance, the other one is the area of politics. These are not comparable. One cannot be used as a model for other. Okay, it's kind of like going into a shoe store to try to figure out how to operate a hospital. Okay, so that's not a good way of comparing things. When it comes to the balance between federal and state governments, I think actually America has shown that its model works very well, because it basically, instead of being one experiment, it ended up being 50 different experiments. And the competition between the states has created the ability for any state, if any state moves away from the values that make America great, then all of a sudden the other states are competing with it. So it cannot move too far away from it, because people have mobility to move between states. So no state can really fuck up too much, because if you fuck up too much, there's mobility between states because you're all American citizens, and the competition makes the states have to come back to the models that work, or else too many people are going to leave your state. So the balance between state power and federal power in America that has created a competitive, a Darwinian model between all of its states that has actually helped all of them grow very faster than other countries, right? The greatest resource of Iran is the Iranian people. And I say that not just because they're very educated and very motivated and they're very entrepreneurial and they're very patriotic. I say this because they also, through the experience that they had in the past 47 years, they have the proper values that make a society great. And let me just give you the list of values that I think that if a people in a society have, and if their state represents those values as well, is basically ideal for maximum growth in a society. Okay, so these are, and you could basically summarize all of these as classical liberal values or Enlightenment values or Western values or the modern Republican tradition. It has different names, right? So these are separation of powers, secularism, representative democracy, free speech or free expression, free trade, free markets, respect for fundamental human rights, property rights, respect for the scientific method, freedom of assembly, respect for rule of law, civic nationalism, individualism or individual liberty, equality under the law. These are the values that are very common in a society. And if the state also represents those values, that's a society that's going to do well.
Okay, next I've got two questions that were given to me in the chat. First, how long for us to get rid of the regime?
Wait, the question is how long is it going to take for us to get rid of the regime?
How long could it take for the US to get rid of the regime?
Okay, the US is not going to get rid of the regime. The Iranian people are going to get rid of the regime. Okay, this is an Iranian revolution. This is not an American revolution. It's not an Israeli revolution. With US help, the Iranian people are going to get rid of the regime. I don't know when. No one knows when. Anybody who comes with a prediction, you know, tell them to stop, right? Nobody knows when. I just know it will happen. I know it will happen because the Iranian people are more determined than ever, and the regime has been weaker than ever before, and this cannot last. If the United States doesn't help, the Iranian people will topple this regime. It's going to take longer, and it's going to be very much more costly. If the United States does help, it will still be the Iranian people who end up toppling the regime. However, because of US help or because of Israel's help, it's going to happen faster, and the cost is going to be a lot lower. The cost in lives. Many thousands of less people will die. Many thousands of people's lives, Iranians' lives, will be saved. And also, by the way, not just Iranians, Israeli lives and other people from around the world will be saved if they help, right? But the reason why United States or Israel cannot do regime change is because they cannot or would not put boots on the ground. You cannot do regime change just with aerial support. You need boots on the ground. You need to actually go and capture government institutions. You need to actually go and, because no matter how many air bombardments you do from the air, it doesn't matter. The institutions that make the Islamic Republic, they could repair that, they could redo that. They go underground. All of that could come back. For a regime change to happen, somebody needs to show up and take over government institutions and everything that makes the Islamic Republic. And United States will not put. So Israel is missing military ability to put boots on the ground, and United States is missing political capital to put boots on the ground. So United States can put boots on the ground from a military perspective, but it cannot put boots on the ground in Iran from an political perspective. It doesn't have enough political capital. The American people would not stand for United States putting boots on the ground in Iran. And honestly, that's a good thing. We don't even want that. Like the Iranian people don't want any boots on the ground, unless it's like a Mossad or commando operation, like a couple of individuals that go in and take someone else. They don't want like a ground invasion. That's not what the Iranian people are hoping for, right? Israel doesn't have enough manpower to have boots on the ground. Iran is very big. Iran is not a neighbor to Israel. It's not like Lebanon. It's not like Gaza. It's not like Syria. The only boots on the ground that Israel has in Iran is the Iranian Mossad agents, which are like, it's not like an invasion. It's basically the people who are, these are like special operations and stuff like that, right? But the boots on the ground that, so given that for regime change, you need boots on the ground, the only boots on the ground that you could rely on are the Iranian people that are already there. And given that the vast majority of the Iranian people want the regime change, all you need to do is basically remove some obstacles from their way and just let the Iranian people do the regime change themselves. So that's regarding who does the regime change, but also with regards to when, nobody knows. And anybody who gives you a prediction, they're just guessing, and you shouldn't take it seriously. It could be anything. I'm not even going to give you a window. I'm not even going to guess. But all I know is that this is a tree that is falling. We're swinging the axe at the tree. We don't know which swing is going to take it down, but all we know is that if we keep swinging, it will come down.
Okay, thank you. The second question says, across multiple news sites, it has been highlighted that CENTCOM are conducting a multi-day aerial readiness exercise in the Middle East. The purpose is to, quote, demonstrate and test the ability to deploy, disperse, and sustain combat air power across the region. How significant do you think this is in the context of an attack on Iran?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've seen a lot of people talk about that as well, and it suggests that it might take an attack might come later than some people anticipate, because it seems like they're basically gathering information and testing for everything. But I think Jeffrey would have a much better answer to this than I would. So, Jeffrey, do you have any answer? Do you have any
So
information on this?
it definitely would, that kind of training is one indicator that one might use to kind of game whether or not where we're leading, striking, not striking. For instance, when we went and did the yoinkening regarding Maduro, I mean, they trained for that for like a month, right? So, I mean, it's definitely a positive indicator.
His
I
follow-up was, is this, do you think, direct preparation for a strike or a smokescreen for surprise attack?
Could be either, both.
And Jeffrey, also, does this also suggest that this might take longer than some people are hoping for, because of all the preparation might take longer?
So remember in a lot of the other responses, we talked about how it's a complex adaptive system that's fluid and ever changing, and actors engage in competitive adaptation. So it's not just the Mullah regime in Iran that's currently occupying Iran. You also have other people like Putin's criminalized counterintelligence state sending in stuff to support the mullahs, Chaicoms, all these other sub-state transnational wackadoodles that the mullahs pulled in that are like butchering brave Persian protesters and resistance. So as that environment changes, so does the good guys' view of how to take apart this monster, right? So they're going to constantly modify their assessment on the fly. That's why it's called competitive adaptation. Both sides are trying to read the environment and the other actors as quickly and as accurately as possible.